I take a very different approach. I definitely don't want to be idle, but I don't want to be fearful. And I encourage you also to be the same for anyone who might be thinking about, okay, how do I react to this? So since 2015, I have been more of a prepper, so to speak. That's kind of when I first started prepping. My wife and I had a piece of land. We built it from the ground up. And so I've always kind of had this mentality. I think we're in the end times. Not really sure. This was me back in 2015. I think we're in the end times. I'm not sure. Let's just prepare. And one of the things I'm going to prepare for, it wasn't even earthquakes back then for me. It was just nuclear war, to be quite honest, because of disastrous foreign policy decisions and these things like these systemic problems in the government wanting to imperialize other countries. And eventually they're going to say enough's enough.
Hey there, it's Zara Sethna. Welcome to the Collapse Life podcast. Great to have you with us. Before we introduce today's special guest, I want to ask you a favor. Please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us a lot. We've been making videos here for almost 3 years now, and we only just crossed over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you like what you're seeing and hearing, please show us some love by sharing us far and wide. 2 years ago, in April 2024, we welcomed to Collapse Life a man called Cyrus Harding. He's a cycles analyst, and he spoke about his very interesting and long career in linguistics and intelligence. And we talked about the direction America is heading, but also about something happening in the skies over the United States at that time, something called the Aleph Tav eclipse. The Aleph Tav is actually a series of 3 eclipses that started first in 2017, followed by another one in 2023, and another one in 2024. And these are details that are important to understand the guest we welcome today. He has discovered that pattern has only happened 3 times in history. In scripture, specifically Genesis 1:14, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven and divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." Abraham Ojeda has been studying these signs in the heavens for some time now and has uncovered very interesting prophecies linked to the Aleph Tav. He's here today to walk us through historic precedent, prophecy that looks to be playing out in 2026, and share his thoughts and insights on what appears to be an interesting few years ahead. Abraham, welcome to Collapse Life. Thank you so much for joining us and for discussing what is going to be a fascinating look at what the stars may be showing us.
Yeah, Zara, thank you so much. And thank you to Stephen as well. Appreciate you guys.
It's great to have you.
Everything you guys are doing with Collapse Life is like, it goes so hand in hand with the things that I've talked about in the past and things I'm going to talk about today with you. So I'm just really excited to share. You mentioned the Aleph eclipse omen. This is a really big deal. Obviously when it was first happening in the airwaves of social media, back in 2024 on April 8th, everybody was talking about it. And, things have kind of like quieted down and died down. People are like, well, I guess nothing really happened. Maybe it was a big nothing burger. Maybe, life is just going to move on. Maybe an eclipse really is just enjoying the shadow, right? If it's a solar eclipse, it's just enjoying the shadow and being under that dark sun. It's just a phenomenon. You only see it once every maybe 100 years or in a location. Actually, it could take centuries for a given location to see a solar eclipse like that. But maybe now things they've kind of died down, people are kind of moving on. But I think the reason why this conversation today is so important is because it's time to look at this a little bit more deeply. I feel like now more than ever, even though I've been studying eclipse cycles throughout history for a few years now, I have a lot more clarity on these things, particularly as it concerns what solar eclipses really mean. I've talked about these things before in my work and my books, but I think what I'm going to show you today, it's so crystal clear. I'm going to show you some historical examples, some things in American history that line up perfectly with what we have seen over our nation. And I think it's really going to be an eye opener, especially for someone who hasn't really understood or taken the time to understand these things.
Yeah.
So
I absolutely think it's going to be astounding for a lot of people. I think we should probably just start with some basics. So maybe first of all, let's start with who you are. Tell us about Overcome Babylon. How did you get started on this particular journey and learn how to kind of tell what you're telling us today from discerning the stars and scripture?
Yeah, I've had an interesting journey. I became a born again Christian in 2008. Um, in the system of Protestant Western evangelical Christianity, I really wanted to get serious with God, so I made the decision to go to Pensacola Christian College just to get a 4-year degree. I actually studied biochemistry more specifically, um, and I ended up becoming a chemist after college. But God just kept tugging on my heart, leading me and guiding me on certain things. I just knew that the world around us really isn't what they say, right? I started looking into 9/11 in 2013. That really opened up my eyes. I met my wife in 2014. We got married in 2015, and she and I had some conversations about 9/11. You know, she was active duty when all that was taking
Wow.
place, September 11th, or yeah, 2001. And yeah, anyways, through a lot of circumstances, God just started really waking me up to the world, the hidden things, right? The mysteries, the secrets of how the universe really works versus the Hollywood portrayal of it,
Mm.
the news cycles, the media industrial complex. And along the way, I remember I was in New Orleans, actually. There was a cafe called Pacino's off of Veteran Boulevard in Metairie. I went to a Bible study with a few guys, and back then it was 2014, so everybody was talking about
Hmm.
blood moons, and all these types of things because Jonathan Cahn was talking about it. Mark Blitz, I believe, was another big voice. Everybody's just talking about blood moons, and so that's actually my first introduction. I started looking into it, then I kind of dropped the ball, but after the 2017 to 2024 eclipse cycle, that 7-year period, roughly 7 years, where they had those 3 solar eclipses over the country, it really sparked my interest. Got really heavy into it after 2020 and the pandemic. And yeah, ever since really 2020 and the pandemic, things really started opening up. And that's kind of a little bit of my journey, Zara. So yeah, I'm just excited to share these things.
Yeah, that's great. And we will get into it right away. I think the only other thing that may be worth clarifying before we get started into the presentation that you've made for us is just for those who aren't familiar with the term Aleph Tav, just explain what it means and what it indicates in scripture. And then that will make more sense as we talk through the signs and the stars.
Yeah, I think a good place to really, a good jumping off point for this conversation really is going to be Psalm chapter 19, verse 7. It says, "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple." So the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. When it says soul there, it's really talking about your heart, your mind, your emotions, your intellect. Making wise the simple. That's exactly what we're talking about today. Because this whole idea of biblical astronomy, it really shouldn't be confusing. It really shouldn't be so enigmatic as people make it out to be. We can actually approach this with a lot of science, with a lot of methodology, understanding history, which is a big part of how the Aleph Tav, how we perceive that, right? A little bit of archaeology, a little bit of this. It's a lot of disciplines. I think that's what makes it a lifelong venture, biblical astronomy, because we're not just looking at secular astronomy, the way the secular world works and what they say,
Mhm.
because NASA has only been around since the 1950s, right? But all of a sudden they're the supreme source of knowledge on this topic. But what I have found, and what others have found also who have gone down this journey of biblical astronomy, is that it is actually the word of God that tells us the truth,
Mhm.
the unfiltered truth. And so I read from you Psalm 19, verse 7. If we go to Psalm 19, verse 1, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork."
Amazing.
So it's saying the law of the Lord is making you from a simple person to a wise person. And then it says, "The heavens declare."
Right.
Like, so that's the context. The context is when we look at the heavens, we should be able to discern things, not only about history that would otherwise have remained hidden, but also our future.
Mhm.
And so, what the Aleph Tav really is, when we study the history of ancient Israel, there was a people group to the north in what is now modern day Lebanon. So, we're talking about the cities of Tyre and Sidon.
Mhm.
Um, they inhabited that region, but they weren't known as the Phoenicians back then. They're the Sidonians, they're the people of Tyre. Now we know them as Lebanese, but what happens, see, this is where it ties into his history quite a lot. You had Israel intermarry with them. For example, the northern king Ahab, his wife was Jezebel, who was from Sidon. She was a Phoenician.
Mhm.
But this word Phoenicia, it originated much later, after a lot of history had went by. But this alphabet, they carried a specific alphabet with them, which is both Hebrew Israelite in origin, but also it was uniquely Phoenician. And that's actually, see, when you look at secular history books, they say our language, the Latin script, for all of the English speakers, you may not know this, right? But we use the Latin script, or the Cyrillic,
Mm.
or the Grecian, the Greek script. All these scripts actually have their origin not in the Greek. That's actually what a lot of people say and textbooks teach. Our languages do not have an origin in the Greek. They actually have an origin that's more ancient. It's the Phoenician language.
Mhm.
And the reason for this is that under Solomon and David, those two great kings of Israel, the whole known world was conquered, and they made an alliance with both the Egyptians and the Phoenicians, came over even, yes, I know it's going to sound controversial and strange, but even as far as the New World, before it was the New World, right? 1492 was not the discovery of the New World. There's evidence to prove this. And actually, I show this in my work and my books. There's actually what's called the Los Lunas Decalogue stone that has the Phoenician script, particularly the Aleph. You see the Aleph on this big stone in New Mexico,
Wow.
of all places. And that dates back to, I mean, we don't really know. It could be 700 BC for all we know. We just don't know. But what we do know is that the Phoenician language has its origins in the Mediterranean, in the Levant. And then with the biblical narrative, we understand, okay, the Aleph, that's the first letter, just like our letter A. That's where our letter A comes
Right.
from. The Aleph of the Phoenicians is actually something that we find in the New World. This is actually where our language really comes from. Phonics, phonetic. See, we have connections all the way back to this ancient people group that mixed with the Israelites and conquered the whole world under Solomon, especially Solomon.
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of a rundown of the Aleph Tav, where it comes from, how it originates. And I think really quickly, Zara, just to answer your question a little bit more concretely, when you open up the word to Genesis 1:1, it says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the English or any, Spanish, German, it's not going to translate those letters there. Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. It's actually Aleph Tav.
Mm.
It's scholars say it's just there for grammatical
Yeah.
correctness, to indicate a direct object and these sorts of things, a proper noun, these sorts of things. But what it really reveals, not all the time, but sometimes in the actual Hebrew original language of the Bible, is that there is the presence of a symbol, Aleph Tav, beginning and end, that actually points to Christ, that points to Jesus. In the book of Revelation, he says, I'm the beginning and the end. Alpha and Omega is how we would think of it, because it was a Greek letter.
Right.
But Aleph Tav is really what he was pointing at. So it's God's signature, in other words, the Aleph Tav.
Yeah. Amazing. That was a great rundown. I think there's tons more for anyone who's interested. They can go and search this out. But I think that was a great place to start, just to set the scene for what you're about to show us. You were talking to us about some historical eclipses that followed a similar pattern to what we've seen more recently here in history. And so maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about what you've discovered there.
Yeah, let's just get the slides on screen if we can.
Sure.
Thank you for that. Yeah. What I call this is the most dangerous sign in history. Now, obviously, because I haven't given maybe the visual, you may be like, well, I see a sideways letter A, these red lines. What does that mean? Well, this is what, again, the American Aleph omen, which you could also interpret as a Tav omen. I'll explain this in a second. The Tav obviously is just the letter T. That's how you can look at it. So you have the sideways letter A, that's the Aleph. Over the nation, you also have T's, crosses, intersections, X's that are present on the image. We'll talk about these. What you see here is that, yes, you can take the individual eclipse paths. So from 2017, 2023, 2024, you overlay them, and we should do these things. This is part of the proper analysis. Overlay them and see what emerges. What's the pattern? What's the picture? And I'm going to show you just how important this is, Zara, as we look at this together. It's more than what what people realize. It really does show us quite a lot. There's so much information here, but you just have to know what you're looking for.
Yeah. Just to be clear, so the Aleph and the Tav that we're looking for in these patterns are from the Paleo Hebrew alphabet. Is that correct?
Well, I guess it's kind of semantics.
Okay.
but I like to more directly identify the Phoenicians as having this as their
Mhm.
script,
Okay.
the Paleo Hebrew script, Phoenician script. But yeah, the Hebrews knew it, used it, and spoke it as well during the mixing of the two nations.
Super.
So
All right. So, where do you want to start with this historical deep dive?
yeah, I'll just say, well, so what does this mean for 2020's America? Guys, we're about to get a lot of clarity on this. Hopefully, in the next few minutes, I can really unpack this. But what we need to do is just look at the crosses individually. So this is the 2017 and, oh goodness, yeah, that's the 2023 cross. So when you look at the 2017 and 2023 paths, these are the paths of totality. Of course, that's kind of incorrect for me to say. Not every eclipse, solar eclipse, has a path of totality. If it's a partial, it's not a total eclipse in the path, but still, like where the most shaded part is, like during the 2023 eclipse, I think the maximum shading or shade that you saw or obscuration was like 91%.
Mhm.
But you get my point, right? The paths, the eclipse paths, the primary paths, you can kind of overlay them. This makes an intersections are right over a particular location. And I'm curious. I mean, I don't know how much you've maybe looked into my work. Are you familiar with where this makes an
So,
intersection?
it's just off the coast of, let's say, Northern California or Washington.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's referred to as the Pacific Northwest, but more specifically, it's the Cascadia subduction zone.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about this. But then we have the 2017-2024 cross. This is almost, it's basically perfectly over what's called the New Madrid seismic zone. And that is a big problem. For anyone that doesn't know, I'll explain this in a moment.
Uh-huh.
But then there's another cross. This is the 2023 and 2024 cross. That's right over Military City, USA, San Antonio. But it just so happens over the I-35 corridor, there is a fault, although it's inactive. But I find it fascinating, and it's not coincidence that the 3 points of intersection all land on fault zones.
Mhm.
They all land on areas that are significant throughout US history. And this is what we're talking about, Zara, when it says that, you quoted at the very beginning, um, let them be for signs and seasons, right? The lights in the firmament. And when we're talking about the lights in the firmament, that God said these are signs, the word oath there, the word sign in Hebrew, could actually mean a warning, an omen, something that means watch out. Like this isn't just a good thing. Like you see doves flying outside maybe your front porch, like, oh, the doves are cute. That means peace. No, 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 no. This does not mean this throughout
Right.
history ever.
Right. It's
For the
interesting.
recipient, yeah, for the recipients that receive these signs.
Mhm.
Does that make
It
sense?
does. Yes.
Yeah. So before I go any further, I just want to give you my framework because, again, this is the reason why there's a lot of confusion on this whole topic of eclipses, blood moons, solar eclipses. We're just going to talk about solar eclipses today, but you really need to understand the locations. That's number one. And then number two, we're going to match historical patterns with recent news.
Mhm.
And then we're going to search the scriptures. Those are my three steps. They're very like simple to list them out, but they're very involved. And I'm not going to get into all the
Yeah.
details. I'm just going to show you what I found, but that's my
Yeah.
framework. That's how I do
That's
it.
great.
One thing as we search the scriptures, well, what happened during the days of the Exodus? And here's the thing, right? People are going to look at this and be like, well, how did he come up with the date for the Exodus? And here's the thing, people have disagreed with me quite a lot about how I derive dates that archaeologists and secular scientists are not really sure of. Secular historians aren't really sure. People have disagreed with me over the years because I've been talking about the date of the Exodus, how it's a key marker in the biblical timeline, the biblical chronology for discerning events throughout history, but also end times events. People have disagreed with me a lot since I really started talking about these things and publishing about them on YouTube in 2022 and Spotify and everything else. But now, here's the thing, Zara. When I started talking about this, because I just published this information, I think a month or two ago, I think it was 2 months ago now, people are like, I doubted you. I doubted your derivation of the dates using the patriarchs from Genesis chapter 5, Genesis chapter 11. But man, I cannot escape this. You found something.
Mhm.
And so, you mentioned this at the beginning. Yes, what we have witnessed over America, this Aleph sign, which I'm saying is the most dangerous sign in history, it was actually witnessed during the time of the book of Exodus, like the 10 plagues, Moses getting the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea.
Mhm.
That was accompanied by a solar eclipse Aleph sign And so that really opens the door to a lot of questions then. So
So did the
what?
the pattern at the time of the Exodus happen a few years before the plague and then the Israelites leaving Mitzrayim, or did it happen during, like, what, when we're talking about this being a warning or an omen, is God giving an advance warning, or is it happening concurrently?
So that's a great question. And this ties in, what you just asked ties into what I'm going to talk about with the Cascadia subduction zone, if you could remember to just point it out.
Okay.
So typically, because God gives signs before he does something,
Mm-hmm.
typically, like, the standard operating procedure is the location gets the sign first, then it's okay for whatever needs to happen. It could be earthquakes, war, famine, upheaval of some sort, but that's what kind of happens with solar eclipses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, right? But now we're starting to see, okay, the Exodus.
Got it.
So the Exodus, where I derived the date precisely, is 1379 BC. What that means then is that most of the sign had already been received in the region, but then the 1378 eclipse that passed through the southern portion of the Red Sea, not the northern, but the southern, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I have to look at it because I don't have all of it perfectly mapped here. But the children of Israel were at Mount Sinai, and they actually would have seen this when the law was being given. They were there for 2 years at the base of Mount Sinai, according to Numbers chapter 10. So solar eclipses kind of can happen concurrently with big events, but typically they happen before, and then something big happens. What makes the American one interesting then, right, Zara, is have we seen anything big yet? I would argue yes, big time. But I'll tie everything in at the end to really make my
Great.
case.
Keep going.
But sure. And the other time that we see this, so the Aleph, again, I've studied a lot of cycles at this point. I looked at ancient Greece, before that, Babylon, Persia, Nineveh, so Assyria. I've looked at a bunch of empires throughout history. When empires fell, what did they see? Was it blood moons? In the case of Babylon, yes, it was. But in the case of Antiochus Epiphanes, he was a Hellenistic ruler of the Seleucid Empire. What's interesting about Antiochus for Epiphanes is that he took the name Antiochus after assuming the throne, and he gave himself the title Epiphanes, which actually means God manifest. So he was very much an antichrist figure in history. And when he was rising to power, let me just pull up my notes here to make sure I'm on point with this. He reigned from 175 to 164 BC.
Okay.
So as he was rising to power, an Aleph sign appears over the regions of Persia and then Saudi Arabia, but also Iraq. The whole Fertile Crescent saw this sign. But primarily, it was situated in such a way that it's separating east from west. I'm going to say that's Persia, and I'm going to say the west is west of Iraq, Mesopotamia, and all that. That's fascinating because you connect it back to Daniel chapter 8. So when we see a sign like this is significant. An Aleph, this is huge. You don't see them. Oh, it happens to connect perfectly to Daniel chapter 8, where you have the one-horned male goat, that Grecian goat, attacking the ram of Persia, and they're going clashing head to head. So, right, so this is where it gets super fascinating, because now I've shown you two examples, the Exodus, but then Antiochus Epiphanes. We're seeing some biblical stuff every time the Aleph comes into view. I could just drop the mic right there, honestly, because that's how big this is.
Right.
So whatever's coming to America, it's biblical. And I'm going to attempt to describe that at the end here.
Right.
But the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes, remember what happened. The book of First Maccabees, which is in the Catholic Bibles, but it's in the King James Version Apocrypha, it talks about how Antiochus, he conquered Persia, right? He robbed the temples. He went over there, but he also, I don't know if it talks about that in the book of Maccabees, but that's the historical account. In the book of Maccabees, he goes to Jerusalem, burns things, changes the laws, and he sacrifices something on the altar to profane it. It doesn't say what it is. A lot of people say it's a pig, but it's referred to as the abomination of desolation.
Right.
And so you have the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and the abomination of desolation. And what I'm going to submit to everyone here listening is that's what we should be expecting then with America. We should be expecting something like the book of Exodus. We should be expecting something like the book of First Maccabees, a really big geopolitical event. And so let's to really discern this though, right? Because I want to just look at crosses. I want to look at other eclipse crosses throughout history. And then it'll make a lot of sense at the end of all this.
Sure.
Once we look at other eclipse crosses, just two eclipses intersecting over region, what does that do? Like the Aleph is really big. Now we've seen what that looks like. Oh my goodness. And then, of course, I forgot to mention Antiochus Epiphanes came to a bitter end. He lost everything and he had to retreat. He ruled for a very short period of time. So the power trip he was on, although it disrupted the whole entire region and destroyed everything, he was ultimately defeated.
Okay.
So that was the judgment omen. Basically, it was for Jerusalem and Persia, but it was also for Antiochus Epiphanes himself.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to this then, what do other eclipse crosses in history tell us? What kind of story does that tell? I've shown you the Aleph. It's big,
Mm-hmm.
really big.
Mm-hmm.
What do crosses teach us? Well, one of them happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. When Sodom and Gomorrah was judged, again, you can derive these dates with some of the work that I've put out there in my books, like Bible Prophecy Secrets, my first book. But when Sodom and Gomorrah was judged, there was a cross that happened before the judgment took place. And it happened over the Red Sea. But there was, I don't have it pictured here, there was another eclipse, massive partial solar eclipse that was visible over the Levant as well. And it would have been highly visible in the Dead Sea region where the cities of the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah, were located. Mm-hmm. So that's just another one. Okay, so supernatural fire. Obviously, this is an example of how God deals with nations that are corrupt or locations that are corrupt. Mm-hmm. Big upheaval. Mm-hmm. So then here's where it gets interesting. We need to look at the seismic danger. And this is how really this omen should be interpreted, as I've kind of already alluded to. But we kind of have to understand a little bit of seismology here. We are on the North American plate in the brown. You can kind of see that in the top of the screen. In the North American plate, as far as tectonic plates that we sit on, it borders with what's called the Juan de Fuca plate over there in the Pacific Northwest. It's that sky bluish one. Uh-huh. Then there's the Pacific plate, that yellow plate. And what we've been seeing in recent years, but I would say since 2017, when that Aleph omen was activated, right? That's when it really started kicking in. We've started seeing a lot more upheavals. Let me just give you a few examples of what we're talking about here. We just saw in Venezuela the 7.2 and 7.5 magnitude quakes. Right. That was on June 24, 2026. Did you happen to see that, Zara?
Yes, devastating.
Yeah, that was no pun intended, that was a collapse event. Yeah. You had buildings, high-rise buildings collapsing, in broad daylight. No one was expecting it. I don't know how earthquake resistant the infrastructure of Venezuela was built to be, but clearly it did not hold up to the test. Caracas was rocked. That was a big problem. There's been tens of thousands of people either dead or missing. Yeah. That is a big problem. Yeah. That was just last month. The year 2025, we saw the Kamchatka, Russia earthquake. That was an 8.8 magnitude megathrust earthquake. That was actually tied as the 6th strongest ever recorded by seismometers. Mm-hmm. Then we saw in 2024, January 1st, we saw a 7.5 magnitude quake that struck Japan. We even witnessed the Turkey-Syria earthquakes that started with a 7.8 magnitude quake in 2023. That was February 6th of 2023. And so just the past few years, there's always been a big one every single year. And the Pacific plate, right, the Ring of Fire has been really active. Really for the past, I would say, handful of years, been really, really active. Massive earthquakes. Even, I don't know how much you follow seismologists or YouTube channels that talk about these things, but, even people who are more moderate in their assessments, like there's a guy named Earthmaster. I really like Earthmaster. Mm-hmm. Even he's starting to sound like kind of a doomsday channel now, like he's starting to sound like a doomsday prepper channel. Like, oh no, like something's got to give with the Cascadia subduction zone. Yeah. Stefan Burns is another good one. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's people are all like, something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when we look at the earthquake hazards in the US, Historically, Alaska has experienced the most earthquakes, the largest earthquakes on record. That southern part of Alaska with tons of fault zones. But I really want to focus obviously on the mainland, the continental US, because there are some areas I think that are overlooked by a lot of people.
Mm.
One of them is called the Wasatch Fault Zone in Salt Lake City, the Salt Lake City Valley. That just experienced a 3.9 earthquake. I believe it was last year. It was on May 1st of last year. That's right. 3.9 earthquake. It shook a little bit of Salt Lake. Nothing really happened. But in 2020, they had a 5.7 earthquake in the Wasatch Valley, and scientists are saying that is overdue. Well, the thing about it, Zara, is in 2023, they were a recipient of the eclipse. So it's not necessarily even a cross sea, but it's even just one eclipse is enough to be like, guys, God's like, I gave you a warning. You need to have wisdom to discern the signs, right? And so obviously California, there's so many fault zones there, but really the big one, the big one in my view, that's the highest hazard at this moment in history is going to be the Cascadia. What I want to show you here is a historical eclipse. This isn't a cross, but it's a cycle. Well, I'll show you a cross in a moment because that's kind of the crux of what I want to show. But to give that cross context, we have to understand the historical pattern here. So this, what I'm showing on screen here, is a solar eclipse cycle, again, 7 years long, from 1694 to 1701. So obviously I have Washington, D.C. on the map. Well, Washington, D.C. wasn't really around, but Tahlequah, Oklahoma was. The Cherokee Nation was. And there's a lot in this image, but here's what I'm going to emphasize. 1694, there's an eclipse that passed through the capitals of two different nations. One was going to be the future capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. But there was one that was Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and it was a judgment omen to the Cherokee. Now watch what happens in this cycle, Zara. In 1699, the very first known recorded earthquake in the New Madrid seismic zone activated. French missionaries documented a massive earthquake. We don't know how large. We just don't have the records for it, but it was a big one, big enough for travelers and the natives to document it. And so we had the New Madrid active during this time in history. And what happened? Obviously, there's a solar eclipse. Well, it wasn't just Christmas Day. By the way, it was Christmas Day, according to Jay Feldman's research, when the Mississippi ran backwards. That's the name of his book, When the Mississippi Ran Backwards. It was Christmas Day, 1699. Well, what happened going into the year 1700? And I don't know if I have the date offhand, but it was like January something or the other, 1700. There was a earthquake called the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. That's kind of what it's known as. It was somewhere between magnitude 8.7 to 9.2. Wow. And like that's even hard for us to fathom. Like what? Because it's exponential. It's logarithmic. It's not like, you know, when you go bump the speed limit up from 10 miles an hour to 11, it's like, okay, there's a little bit of a change. No, we're like when we're talking about going from like 6 to 7s all the way to 9, that is just like, it's hard to even fathom the level of catastrophic destruction. But here's how we can kind of quantify this one. In 1700, the last megathrust earthquake in the Cascadia subduction zone, there was so much shaking right there on the west coast that coastal sediment records actually indicate how far the water went inland. It went really far. Basically, all the cities of Seattle, Portland, all that area, Portlandia, all that stuff. It's if that happened again, those cities are no longer going to be inhabitable for a while. They're going to be submerged big time tsunami.
They were just inundated with water.
Yeah, like I think scientists are estimating maybe 100, 150 feet tall of just tsunami. Yeah. But here's what happened. Because we have the Japanese records, especially from Honshu Island and the island chain of Japan, Honshu got absolutely not necessarily super devastated, but villages along the coast, they had to deal with some flooding and some problems from waves that were anywhere from 10, 20, maybe 30 feet tall. 9 to 12 hours later is the estimate. 9 to 12 hours from when the Cascadia went off, you already had all those waves crossing that super long distance across the Pacific all the way to Japan. Yeah. Like how crazy is that?
Yeah. Yeah. And imagine now with all the development, as you said, the devastation would be huge now.
Oh yeah, for the Pacific Northwest, because that we're talking about Vancouver all the way up to Cape Mendocino. I mean, it's Northern California too. I mean, it's a lot of it covers a lot of ground there.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, I've shown it on screen. I haven't explicitly stated it. There is that February 7th, 1701 solar eclipse, but see, that came almost a year later after the earthquake already happened. But when we understand the context of that solar eclipse, it's not just an isolated blip on the radar. Like, it's not just an anomaly. It perfectly connects with the 1694 solar eclipse to create a 7-year cycle. Again, there's that number, 7.
Yeah.
It's almost the same duration of 2017 to 2024.
Right. Exactly.
And so we just have this historical precedent. When an area sees a solar eclipse like this, watch out. This is a warning. And so this is what took place in those days. I call this the 1694 to 1701 earthquake activation omen, because again, we didn't just see the Cascadia subduction zone activate during this time. It was also the new Madrid seismic zone. Like, how big is that? Both of them were activated.
Right.
And both of them were recipients of solar eclipses.
Right.
Like, it tells us, clearly, maybe this isn't always true for every single nation, obviously, but for the United States, our history in America reveals that earthquakes and natural disasters go hand in hand with eclipses. And I kind of said this at the beginning, but for an area to see a solar eclipse pass through its land, a territory, it takes a long time. It could take a long time for that to really happen. Decades, centuries. It's not normal. It's uncommon. It's rare. So again, to see an area getting 2 eclipses in rapid succession in a 7-year cycle, that's really big. There's another one. It's not quite a 7-year cycle. It's a 5 and some change year cycle. About 5 years. From 1806 to 1811, there was a solar eclipse cross over what we consider the Midwest, the Plains states. But this, again, ties directly into the new Madrid seismic zone. Because when was the last time the new Madrid was activated? It was 1811, on December 1811. We saw massive earthquakes hit. It was 90 days, perfectly 90 days after the September 1811 eclipse was visited the area. 90 days, you have 7.0 earthquakes and above.
Interesting.
Hitting in rapid succession. It was hundreds of aftershocks. People were having heart attacks. People were fainting. People were totally disoriented. Their animals were running around wild everywhere. I mean, people were getting caught in huge slips of the ground where there's just huge crevices and faults that just the earth is torn apart. People were tripping and falling inside of these vacancies in the earth. I mean, it was massive. Zara, I don't know if have you studied when the New Madrid was activated last time it was?
No, I have not.
Yeah. To give you an idea, if such a thing were to happen again, the New Madrid really activating with hundreds of aftershocks, big time 7.0 or plus magnitude earthquakes, I believe it is FEMA, the USGS, and other government agencies, they're estimating 40 billion in losses. I mean, we're talking tens of billions in damage. It's a big problem because most people just aren't even aware that it's a threat. And this is true of the Cascadia subduction zone as well. Most people just don't even know that these things exist. This is part of our history, let alone the solar eclipse cycles that are telling us to watch out for this now more than ever.
Absolutely. Most people would never know unless you live in that area where that happened and that history is kept alive. Most people around the country would never know that in 1811 the earth opened up and swallowed people, just like in scripture. So this is great.
Yeah, and
it's not great. It's great that the way you're telling the story is great. Let me just be clear.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone has really talked about this the way it needs to be talked about. I need to get louder about this. I need to do way more videos and more podcasts and everything talking about this, because it's such a serious threat, not because it could happen and hypothetically speaking, but the proximity is here. because the signs are present.
Hmm.
The historical signs are matching with the present day reality. And what's very fascinating about this historical cycle from 1806 to 1811 is the wars that were happening during those days.
Right.
Did you know that the White House was burned down along with part of the Capitol building by British forces in 1812 with the War of 1812?
Yeah.
So the United States was at war with the British. Um, Not only this, Zara, but there was actually historical Venezuela earthquakes that happened right with the 1811 earthquakes.
Interesting.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I All the signs are everything's lined up.
Hmm.
It's like someone just put a row of dominoes. They're all standing up, and God is about to hit one, and it's all going to come falling down. The house of cards, the dominoes, however you want to describe this. And it's definitely not going to be the end of the world. It's just going to be an upheaval, and there's going to be a lot of economic loss that is going to make US military campaigns, one of which currently is Iran, unsustainable, untenable.
Hmm.
They're going to have to retreat, and this is going to actually lead to the collapse of the nation. You know, one of the places right here, let me see if, yeah, I'll talk about Iran in a moment. One of the places, if you just picture with me, I know it's not on screen, picture with me the American Aleph omen from 2017 and 2024. What you find is something very interesting as well. Memphis, Tennessee is right in where the new Madrid is going to strike. It's going to affect Missouri, Arkansas, Southern Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, uh, of course Mississippi. I'm not sure if I mentioned Mississippi.
Hmm.
It's going to affect a lot of states. So even though it's on the southeastern corner of Missouri, it's going to affect a lot of area. And one of the areas that will be affected is uh, Nashville, Memphis. Well, what has Elon Musk been doing? Putting a bunch of data centers and AI infrastructure there by the billions and billions of dollars. You know,
Hmm.
they've gotten foreign investments from UAE in the billions and billions of dollars for data centers. The same thing is true in the Wasatch Valley over in Utah that I mentioned is overdue for an earthquake. They're also putting data centers over there in Salt Lake. And so the United States has been pouring all of this money into data centers. And it just so happens that at least three that I know of, because you have the Amazon data centers over in Washington State, you have Microsoft headquarters, at least three prime locations for earthquakes are full of data infrastructure that's very expensive. They're never going to recoup that investment.
Right.
So
But also
we're
the infrastructure repercussions if those data centers go down and we lose access to important systems. So if the internet goes down and stays down for an extended period, or if certain systems, banking systems, financial systems, ATMs, those kinds of things, which may be managed by those data centers, go down, that impacts everybody in the country, not just people who live in these seismic zones, right?
exactly, because I forget what the percentage is. It might be over 80 or 90%. I forget exactly off the top of my head. But most of telecommunications, internet, even cellular, it is subterranean, right? That's why over there in the Red Sea, the Houthis are constantly like, "Hey, we're going to cut Red Sea cables, underwater Red Sea
Right.
cables, to hinder military advancement, military occupation, imperialism in the region." Well, the reason that is a viable, legitimate threat, cutting cables for communication underneath the Red Sea, is because most of communication is actually terrestrial rather than what we have been kind of led to believe, that it's satellite, it's space oriented, and these types of things, aerospace.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, people are going to find out really quickly just how fragile our system is. I mean, just think about when, I don't know if this has happened to you, it happened to us recently, like a year ago. Someone was digging with a backhoe and accidentally cut through a fiber optic cable, and the whole, like a big, humongous area was without internet for like a week or something like
Yeah. Yeah. It hasn't happened to us, but I can imagine, and it happens all the time. So yeah, but think about that on a much bigger scale. And I mean, we saw 2 years ago, I think it was, when flights had to be canceled because there was a outage, and the complexity of our system and the interconnectedness of everything. I don't think people actually recognize, because we haven't experienced it yet, how big a impact something like this could have. So yeah, great. It's great to bring these warnings to people's attention.
Yeah, and I think another really important point, if we just go back to kind of the Cascadia, if we can probably see it from here a little bit better, but with the Cascadia, Amazon Web Services hosts a very large percentage of the internet. Well, they have a lot of data centers everywhere, but again, I mentioned it. Washington is a prime location for Amazon KDP, or not KDP, but Amazon Web Services.
Washington State, the West Coast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Washington State, the West Coast, absolutely. Um, there's just a lot of ways that the empire is going to fall. Now, again, the reason I say that is simply because the signs have been given.
Yeah.
If it weren't for this was never really that big of my message pre 2024, but it became so because of the signs.
Are you anticipating, so what we've been looking at over the last few minutes is crosses, but if we go back to the idea of the Aleph, are you anticipating that Cascadius and New Madrid happen at the same time or around the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Going off a historical precedent, the 1701, 1694 cycle, it was Christmas Day, so December 25th, 1699, when the New Madrid was, at least we have a record that something was going on there from French missionaries traveling through the area. It could be that it could happen just like it did back then, because right in January, the very next, like a few days later, you have the Cascadia going off.
Okay.
According to the Japanese record. So it was days.
Right.
So, hey, look, things could kind of like just happen slowly, but I'm getting the impression that once things start shaking, they may not stop for like a month or two. I don't know. That's just a wild guess. We really don't know, but it's going to catch so many people by surprise. And really the last piece of the puzzle here is Iran, because I don't know if you know this, but so the very last solar eclipse was a total solar eclipse. It was April 8th, 2024. It entered Texas, Eagle Pass, at around noon. It was like 12:01, 12:02. It traveled all the way up through Maine. It exited through Maine. Just 4 days later, the United States was at war with Iran, effectively, because Iran started launching missiles towards Israel. I mean, it would happen in such short succession. And so Iran is actually part of the message. Because when you remember what I said for number one, know the locations in my 3-step framework, we have to know the locations. Part of that is understanding the names of locations. So let me just give you, I wanted to put this on screen, but I kind of ran out of time. We have what are called, in my book, I call them the Book of Jonah places. I'm not going to get into that because it's kind of detailed, but basically there were 1, 2, 3 Persias that were basically an eclipse passed over them during the Aleph omen. 3 Persias, 1 Persia in Tennessee, 1 Persia in New York, 1 Persia in Iowa.
Interesting. So in 2024, when the eclipse happened, it passed over towns with the name Persia?
Correct. Yeah, and it's wild when you look into this, how many Persias, Canaans, Ninevehs, Jonahs. There's even a Mesopotamia, Ohio. People don't realize this. I've documented all these things in my second book, Bible Prophecy Secrets 2. It's kind of like a piece of history here. Manasseh, you have a lot of names. Samaria, Judah, all kinds of stuff.
And they were all in the actual path of totality of that eclipse?
Yeah, that's correct. Wow. To different degrees, but a lot of them are 100%. Right. So just to kind of give you like one example, Jerusalem, let me see. You have Jerusalem, Vermont. That was 100% in the path of totality. So going back to Iran being a part of this message and the fact that we were at war with them just 4 days after the conclusion of the 7-year omen, there's actually 2 places called Babylon, which may not mean much. Like Babylon was different than Iran, different than Persia, right? Iran, modern day Iran, is ancient Persia. But Babylon, when it conquered the known world in about 586, they took out the kingdom of Judah. When they conquered the known world, they also took over a province of Iran, modern day Iran, called Elam. That's spelled Elam. And so Babylon could definitely be connected to Iran, but Mesopotamia is connected to Iran also. But you have all this, so you have all these Iran cities, but specifically, and I put the flags there on screen just for effect,
Hmm.
for dramatic effect. But you have Persia locations
Yeah.
that saw this, and then we're at war. This is the biggest thing in foreign policy. We have to deal with the problem with Iran. They have nuclear weapons, says our government, or at least they're in the process of getting them, says our government. We have to decapitate them at all costs. We already, did decapitation strikes to a sitting president of theirs, or leadership at least.
Hmm.
There's just been this constant struggle against Iran, and it was part of the eclipse cycle.
Amazing.
It's part of what I'm calling the writing on the wall,
Yeah.
the Aleph. It's it's not normal. It's not coincidence. And there's the crash course between East versus West never stopped in Daniel chapter 8. It never stopped with Antiochus Epiphanes. But we see this clash between East and West. And what we're going to find out is that the West has run its course and there's a new power from the East that's rising. You call it the BRICS nations if you want to call it the BRICS nations. Call it, a new Persian empire. Call it what you want to call it. But we're going to see something dramatically shift, and that is another component of the Aleph sign. I'm glad we had time to get to it here at the end.
Amazing. That is incredibly insightful. Was that all the visuals that you've had? Great.
Yeah, that was what I had.
It
Yeah.
it's pretty it's very thorough, and so I really appreciate you putting that together. The visuals are so clear. One of the things that you've been talking about as you do all your live streams on your Substack and on your YouTube channel is talking people through what they can do now that you've presented them with this information about what might be coming, based on what you see in biblical astronomy. What can people do to sort of prepare themselves? What kind of advice have you been sharing?
Ooh, this is a tough one, Zara, because there's so many things you can say, right? Now, there's really two ways to approach this, right? Either, and this is the way people are going to approach it. This is great information. This is fascinating. I see the cycles. I see the history. I see the precedent. But I'm not going to worry about anything. God is going to take care of me. That's one approach.
Mm-hmm.
The other approach is going to be, oh my goodness, I need to get into overdrive and be fearful and fearful and fearful and do something as fast as possible and prepare and be a prepper. That's kind of the other approach, but which is not necessarily bad, but the fear is bad.
Yes.
But then I should say there's another approach, right? Maybe someone is not who's listening to this like, well, I tuned in because I wanted to see maybe a different perspective. I respect people of faith, I respect spirituality, but the whole God thing's not really for me. I think this too shall pass. It's going to be fine. It's really not a big deal. The government will provide, whether it's in the form of FEMA, there's preparedness and disaster plans in place. Like I don't have to worry about anything. So basically, what it all comes down to for both religious people and also kind of the statist people, secular folks, there's a tendency to err towards idleness or complacency or fatalism. Fatalism being like, I just accept the predetermined reality that's given to me because there's really nothing you can do anyway.
Right.
But then there's obviously an extreme response, and this tends to be, something that we see on social media a lot with doomsday preppers and these types of channels that are like always encouraging people to stockpile and hoard and do all these kinds of things that are very stressful, to be honest. I take a very different approach. I definitely don't want to be idle, but I don't want to be fearful. And I encourage you also to be the same for anyone who might be thinking about, okay, how do I react to this? So since 2015, I have been more of a prepper, so to speak. That's kind of when I first started prepping. My wife and I had a piece of land. We built it from the ground up. And so I've always kind of had this mentality. I think we're in the end times. Not really sure. This was me back in 2015. I think we're in the end times. I'm not sure. Let's just prepare.
Right.
And one of the things I'm going to prepare for, it wasn't even earthquakes back then for me. It was just nuclear war, to be quite honest. Because of disastrous foreign policy decisions and these things like these systemic problems in the government wanting to imperialize other countries. And eventually they're going to say enough's enough. But so I have always kind of looked at strategic relocation. This is a really broad term, but really what it means is just establishing a secure and resilient homestead that's away from crisis areas. This is, and put it to kind of put it simply, this is what we see in Genesis chapters 12, specifically 13, and then 18 and 19. You have the story of Abraham, the wise shepherd that left his homeland of Haran, Ur of the Chaldees, and he went and took his nephew Lot with him. And Lot and Abraham, well, they have a little bit of contention, and Lot goes into the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mhm.
And Abraham chooses a harder life. He chooses to be in the wilderness. He learns how to survive. He doesn't have convenience. He doesn't have, food at his fingertips whenever he wants to just be able to go and enjoy the abundance, because it said that before Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, it was like the Garden of Eden, like the Garden of God, paradise. But see, Lot, he lifted up his eyes. He's like, I want convenience. And so what this is really going to come down to for a lot of people is, are we willing to sacrifice and choose life now so that we're already set up when a crisis occurs?
Mhm.
This is really the fundamental question that we need to all ask. Because Deuteronomy 30, verse 19, again, going back to the law of the Lord, right? The law of Yehovah, the Torah. Choose life. I have set this day before you the blessing and the curse. Therefore, choose life that you and your descendants may live. And so that's what I encourage anyone to do, is choose life, understand the warnings. It is not too late to act.
Mhm.
I think this is going to be the number one pushback, Zara, that you and I, whenever we talk about these things and approach people, just too late. I'm broke. I don't have enough money. But I think if you just start now, see how far you get, and you will already have a wonderful, beautifully imagined plan of action
Mhm.
that you're working towards, rather than just an amorphous, darkness. You don't really see, don't really have a vision of what you're going to do. That's not a good place to be.
Right.
Have a vision, have an imagination, use your imagination, have a plan, and do your best to implement it.
Right. At least get off zero. Right. Doing nothing is not a plan. At least doing something puts you in control. And I truly believe that as you start to do things, take action, and help yourself, then that's when God really steps in and puts things in your path to be able to help you.
Yeah, and to add to that, Zara, when I first left the city, so I left the city in 2018. I'll just share this story briefly. I did not have a job lined up. My wife didn't have a job lined up. Well, this is scary.
Mhm.
But here's what happened. Long story short, we started building a homestead type of location, a secure location, away from population, away from earthquakes and nuclear war and disasters, right?
Mhm.
Up in the Rocky Mountains, about 2.5 hours outside of Denver. And the home builder that we hired, he was dishonest. He stole probably over $10,000. I'm probably tens of thousands of dollars, but at least over 10K.
Mhm.
He just up and left, didn't finish the job, but he at least framed the house and dried it in. So we're like, we're going to move there. We're going to finish it ourselves. In 2018, we arrived with our RV with solar panels on the back, no jobs, like I said. My wife and I'll never forget this because we were talking about this the other day. We walk into the house, the studs, you could see all the 2x4s, the 2x6s just sticking out, no insulation. It had a lot of work to do,
Yeah.
over 100K worth of work to do.
Wow.
But my wife and I stood there hand in hand and we prayed, Lord Jesus, we know this is your will. We know you brought us out here. We know that you gave us this property. We know you gave us this house. We know that you've gotten us this far. And so we proclaim in Jesus' name that this house will be finished. We don't know how, but we trust and we proclaim this house to be finished. And we walked around, we imagined it. And 2 years later, it was done.
Amazing. An amazing story. Amen. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it is faith. It is you're Abraham and you are living your namesake's story, right? Just go and things will work out. So amazing.
Yeah. And obviously that's where having a relationship with Christ, having a relationship with God is paramount. Yeah. Without that, I would have given up a long time ago. There's no way I could have done the things that I'm doing. There's no way I would have written books about Bible prophecy, right? I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So all glory to God. I'm just a product of what the scriptures teach, and that's to put all your hope, faith, and trust in the finished work of Christ. Lead not on your own understanding. Acknowledge the Lord, and He will direct your paths.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done.
Well, it's an amazing story, and obviously he is working through you. So we're so grateful and blessed to have you join us and share this. And there's so much more to share. So we really do hope that you will come back and share more with our audience in the future, and not in the very long term future, but hopefully quite soon.
Absolutely. I'd love to be back. Just let me know what you feel we need to cover. We'll cover it. There's obviously a lot more I didn't get to talk about today, but
Yes. Yeah.
another time, another time.
Absolutely. So I won't let you go before you just give a little plug for all your different platforms, and let people know how they can find you and follow the work that you do.
Yeah, you guys can go to overcomebabylon.com. That actually is my Substack. I linked my domain to it. So overcomebabylon.com is Substack. You can use the Substack app. And I feel like that's a really good place these days to really stay up to date. Check out Overcome Babylon YouTube. That's something that I've obviously poured a lot of heart and soul into over the past few years since 2022 when I launched it. So yeah, check all that out, guys. Overcome Babylon, and then overcomebabylon.com.
Amen. Thank you so much, Abraham.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you to everyone who's watching. If this conversation was useful to you, please like the video and share it with anyone you know who you think might benefit from it. Every week on Collapse Life, we look at what's breaking in society. We look for influences that other people might not have thought of. And we ask the hard questions in order to figure out what we can still do about it. If you're not already on the list, please head over to collapselife.com and subscribe now. Free subscribers get the latest news, but paid subscribers go one level deeper with analysis and tools to put their plans into action. We understand if a paid subscription isn't right for you now, but if you would still like to support our work with a one-time gift, you can do so using the donate button at the top of our homepage. Either way, we just thank you so much for being on this journey with us, and we hope to see you again next week. In the meantime, just remember, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.